Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the ISO, I'd like to welcome you to the Tariff Clarification Spring 2025 Draft Tariff Language Stakeholder Call. My name is Hannah Pearson, representing ISO Stakeholder Affairs, and I'll be facilitating the web conference today. I'm joined by Sarah Kozel, Senior Counsel, Federal Regulatory and Markets, Andrew Ulmer, Assistant General Counsel, John Anders, Deputy General Counsel, and John Fomer, Lead Counsel. Just some housekeeping reminders. This call is being recorded for informational and convenience purposes, and any related transcripts should not be reprinted without the ISO's permission. Please keep comments professional and respectful, and please try to be brief and refrain from repeating what has already been said. And if you want to ask questions during the meeting, you can open the participant and chat panels on the bottom right. You can then raise your hand by selecting the raise hand icon, or if you're joined audio only, you can press *3 on your device. For everyone joining us today, please state your name and affiliation first before speaking, and you may also send comments and questions via chat to all panelists. Today's agenda will include a background from Sarah Kozel, and then draft tariff changes red line review from John Fomer, Andrew Ulmer, and Sarah Kozel. So with that, I will hand it off to Sarah.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Stacy. So many of you are probably familiar with the tariff clarification process. We've gone through this on a fairly close to annual basis where we can find issues with the tariff that need revision. They are not policy changes. They are typically typographical or clarifications, or could be some kind of conflict where we missed something in a recent tariff filing. And so what we're doing today is a mini bucket of sorts. It'll be a shortened filing. You've seen the proposed tariff language that we posted. And these are kind of more time-sensitive items than our typical annual process. So you will likely see another tariff clarification filing coming in the next couple months, but these are a few smaller items that we want to get before FERC so we can get that resolved in our tariff more quickly. So I'm joined by John Fomer and Andrew Ulmer today, who are going to help me go through the different items as they pertain to the subject matter areas that we work on. And I will project the document that we posted. Okay, fantastic. So I'm going to turn this over to Andrew to walk through this. Just thank you all for being here, and for those of you who submitted comments, we are looking forward to chatting and responding today. So Andrew, I'll turn it to you.
Thank you, Sarah. Can you hear me? Okay. Good morning. And good afternoon if you're out in another time zone. This is Andrew Ulmer. I work in the ISO's legal department, and I was going to introduce a set of changes related to how variable energy resources participate in the ISO's markets while they are developing a state-of-the-art forecast between that time and the time they reach commercial operation. The language changes related to this issue appear in Section 30.5 and also Appendix Q. And what they seek to do is explain that during this time when a resource is developing its state-of-the-art forecast, it should participate by submitting a self-schedule, as opposed to submitting an economic bid. And the rationale for structuring this language in Section 30 is associated with the fact that in Section 34 of our tariff, which governs the real-time market and bidding in the real-time market for variable energy resources, those resources are only able to have an upper economic limit associated with their capabilities and bidding based on the establishment of a state-of-the-art forecast, whether that forecast is administered by the California ISO or if it's administered by an independent entity. And in either case, those forecasts are what are critical inputs to the ability of a variable resource to have an upper economic limit and thereby submit economic bids. So this clarification is seeking to build on that foundation and make it clear that these resources should be submitting self-schedules while they are developing their state-of-the-art forecast. So that's the thrust of the change. And I'll give you a little bit of background for the rationale for why we're making this clarification before we talk about comments received and maybe open it up for questions and other comments. And the rationale really springs from observations we have in some cases where we've observed what I think we consider unwarranted bid cost recovery payments, where in the 15-minute market, a resource submits a bid, an economic bid, even though it doesn't have a state-of-the-art forecast yet. And the 15-minute market basically clears that resource to operate at its maximum, irrespective of whether or not or what the resource's forecasted production output is. However, in the 5-minute market, in the real-time dispatch, we are receiving telemetry from the resource, and we effectively, I think the phrase I've heard is echo back that telemetry to the resource, and sometimes then ask the resource to operate at that telemetry level, which is less than the resource's upper rated Pmax. And as a result, that differential can potentially give rise to bid cost recovery in the real-time market, and we see that as unwarranted, and so are thinking that it's best to propose that a resource instead self-schedule. So that's sort of the genesis of where this comes from. We did receive some comments from Northern California Power Agency expressing concerns with this approach, so flagging it that it is a change from the ability to submit economic bids during the time frame between when a resource reaches commercial operation and the time it develops a state-of-the-art forecast, and expressing concern that without the ability to submit economic bids to curtail a resource during periods of negative pricing, it can have severe economic impacts. I know that this matter has also been discussed in the context of a proposed revision request to our business practice manuals, and similar concerns have been expressed there. So we are going to look at those concerns and reflect on them as we go forward, and really would appreciate other comments. I would note that NCPA also raised some questions about how an entity can develop its own forecast, and questions about where sort of guidance for that process is. There is some guidance in the context of our business practice manuals for market operations in one of our appendices to that business practice manual. And there's also some guidance and information in the context of our new resource implementation guide. And to the extent there are specific questions about how to develop a state-of-the-art forecast using an independent entity, we can certainly take those up offline and make sure that folks have access to the right points of contact at the ISO to pursue those. So I'll stop there, and again, we still need to discuss internally NCPA's comments and also some of the concerns I know that have been expressed in the context of the business practice manual change management process, and are going to reflect on those before we take any next steps. But I would like to hear any questions or other observations, and I think maybe there are already participants with hands raised. So I'll stop and turn it over to the moderator.
Yep, looks like we have a few hand raised. We'll start with Susan Schneider.
Yes, hi, Susan Schneider, Phoenix Consulting, representing Large Scale Solar Association. Can you hear me okay?
Hi, Susan, we can. Good morning.
Okay, good morning. I have a couple of issues here. One of them is a process issue. As you mentioned, the CAISO has proposed this exact same change in the BPM change management process. There was a call on Monday this week in that process, and there was no mention of the fact that this exact change was in this miscellaneous tariff filing. So we have, there are, as you mentioned, there are many people who submitted comments in that particular process, and we have the same comments here substantively. But in terms of process, the people who were participating in that process had no idea that this other process was happening, and there was no mention of it on the call just this week. So I think there is a little bit of a notice issue here, where people should have been informed that it was here. We didn't find out in time to even submit comments here. So I think we do have a real big process issue with this. A second process issue is related to a little bit to the substance issue. First of all, we're concerned that the CAISO has done a lot over the years to encourage people to submit economic bids, in particular variable energy resources. And many of these resources will be coming online in the spring in order to be ready for the summer. And there has been, as far as we can see, no analysis of either the contribution to overgeneration and potential reliability-based curtailments because these resources cannot submit economic bids, or any analysis of the economic impact on the particular resources from the inability to curtail economically. Under most PPAs, reliability-based curtailments are not compensated. And so, and if the economic bids are impossible, then there could potentially be, for a month or two during the most sensitive time, a real economic impact based on negative prices. We're also concerned, and we understand the need to train the neural network models for PERP. We were very, very involved in that over the years. And we also understand potentially the BCR issue. But there are other options for addressing that, and there's been no response to any of the comments in the PRR process. So we don't know what is going on as far as the ISO internal discussions, but there have been no discussions of other options. For example, if an economic bid is dispatched that is submitted, then maybe that in those intervals, the BCR wouldn't apply. Or maybe if the issue is training the models, well then if an economic bid is dispatched, maybe you would ignore those intervals and it might take another week or two, and that would be up to the developer really, or the scheduling coordinator to decide what to do. But there are other options for addressing this issue rather than just a blanket prohibitions on economic bids during this period. And we really would like to have a discussion of those other options. Just as I said, an analysis of some kind of economic and operational impact of this change, particularly as large amounts of variable resources will be coming online in the future, in the spring potentially. And we just have, it's been like, we feel like we've been submitting comments into a black hole at this point. So we really would like this needs a little more process around it, including notifying the people participating in the other process that it's actually under consideration in this process before they were surprised by a tariff filing that they didn't even know about. So that's anyway, so we have process issues here, we have substance issues, and some of the substance issues, of course, related to process. So I just wanted to put that out there. Apologize, we would have put in something in writing had we known about this in time, but we do think that these points do deserve some serious consideration.
Susan, thank you. And the process and substance points both noted. And don't worry about not submitting comments. I've taken notes, so we've got a record of those, and we'll definitely take them back and give them some consideration.
Okay, and I guess we can talk later at the at the end of the call. But in terms of, is there an opportunity for more process here, and how can that happen? I guess we'll look forward to hearing about that. So anyway, thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks, Andrew.
Okay, thank you.
Next up is Chris Devon.
Hi there, this is Chris Devon with TerraGen. Can you guys hear me?
Hello, Chris. Good morning.
Morning, Andrew. Thank you. I would just second I think everything that Susan mentioned, and I just wanted to lend our voice to saying that there's other things that we've discussed with CAISO prior in the response to our PRR comments that we thought there might be some other potential discussion on how to address the BCR concern rather than have this self-scheduling requirement. So this was a bit of a surprise to see this in this tariff bucket filing, and I would like to hear what the next steps plans are. I think if you guys are going to file this on March 31st as is, then that would be a concern for us. So hopefully we can slow down a little bit and have maybe some more robust discussion. I think just recalling the CAISO's roadmap process, there was something called VER enhancements on that roadmap that was then subsequently removed. So this item would have been a particularly good item for an initiative like that rather than being placed here, I think. So just the dynamic with the PRR and kind of that being put on hold and then things being moved over here has us, scratching our heads a bit, just to say it that way, I think. So would be interested just to try to have a little bit more discussion and actual, proposal, because it does seem, at least to us, that this is more than just a clarification, and it is really affecting the, rates and terms in the tariff, because the requirement to bid economically does have, to self-schedule rather than bid economically does have those price impacts that Susan had mentioned. So I think I'll wrap it up there rather than continue to repeat anything else. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. And to Susan's comment, Chris, and yours, we'll certainly provide some additional guidance on process next steps for discussion. So thank you.
Okay, last one is Carrie Bentley.
Hi, this is Carrie Bentley with the Western Power Trading Forum. Just echoing what they said, but then adding a couple other items. One, I really appreciated Sarah going over the purpose of this call. And I'll just note, I just don't think this falls into the right category for this venue. I think just the tariff clarification is an inappropriate venue for a policy change by the CAISO's own kind of rules and standards. So this just really seems like the wrong place. Additionally, just on substance, and again, I apologize, I didn't find out about this until a couple days ago too, so I was unable to put in comments. But I think the language is too vague. Just generally, I understand the concern, but I think when you're doing the trade-off to economically harm good actors to potentially mitigate maybe some bad actors, there needs to be more justification on that, and it needs to be more carefully considered than what we could do in a tariff clarification call. So thanks, and looking forward to next steps as well.
Okay, Carrie, thank you very much for those comments. I'll end by saying, we'll take all these back. We will look at them, reflect on them, and follow up to give you some guidance on what steps are next, and certainly we'll do that before there's any submission, if you will, to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to make a proposed change. The issue is one that arises from what we see as unwarranted bid cost recovery, but also an existing construct whereby we do want to encourage economic bidding by variable energy resources. That is something we want, and we think the policy is in place for that. An important component of that policy is utilizing a production forecast, one that we have operational reliance on, and the vast overwhelming majority of variable energy resources use the ISO's own production forecast for purposes of facilitating economic bidding. But there is the opportunity to also develop an independent forecast, but that is a process that also occurs in consultation with the ISO's forecasting team. So essentially, we're trying to give effect to kind of an existing market construct that provides the foundation for economic bidding, which again is that state-of-the-art forecast. But I completely recognize the concerns that are being expressed and acknowledge them. And like I said, we'll take the comments back and talk with folks internally, both about the process concerns and also the substantive arguments that are being raised. So with that, I'll commit to provide some further updates, and I will turn it back to Sarah for perhaps the next topic.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. I'm going to scroll down to this next section, 33.2.8, which is John Spomers.
Hi, good morning, everybody. The topic that I'm going to present is new language in the tariff that simply clarifies that information exchanged between CAISO and a prospective EDAM entity during the implementation phase will be treated as confidential so long as it's marked up as such. For context, Tariff Section 33.2 describes how an EIM entity can transition to becoming an EDAM entity for purposes of participating in EDAM. As part of this process, the EDAM entity must sign a pro forma implementation agreement and work with CAISO to complete various onboarding activities. So very similar to the way it works with EIM implementation. These onboarding activities require the parties to exchange commercially sensitive information so that CAISO can configure its business and software systems to incorporate the EDAM entity into the day-ahead market. Like I said before, this is similar to how it works in EIM. With EIM, the EIM implementation agreements contain a confidentiality provision in them, stating that all information received from the other party in connection with implementation and marked as confidential will be treated as such. And in the absence of such a provision in the pro forma EDAM implementation agreement, we just wanted to close the loop, with this language and include language in 33.2, 33.2.8 specifically, that is substantially similar to the confidentiality statement in the EIM implementation agreements. Currently, CAISO and prospective EDAM entities already treat sensitive information exchanged during the implementation stage as confidential. That information from the EDAM entities is protected under Section 20 and various other tariff provisions and other agreements that we may have in place with those entities. But this proposed language simply confirms the existing practice and ensures that the parties can continue to share confidential information needed to fulfill their obligations, and knowing that will be protected from disclosure. So, we believe this language is consistent with our commitment throughout our tariff to maintain the confidentiality of market participants' information, as well as protecting CAISO's own confidential information that is shared with the EDAM entity during implementation. So that's the goal of the language here. And with that context, I will open it up to see if anybody has any questions or comments.
I do have a hand raised from Mike McGuffin.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to ask a mechanics question. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you. So the way I understood it, and it may not actually work this way, but currently, if you do not clear in this interim period between COD and obtaining a VER forecast, if you don't clear the day-ahead market and you submit a real-time economic offer, what happens is you clear the FMM, but the RTD forces a buyback of those FMM quantities and effectively clears you at zero. Do I understand that right?
I'm sorry. Is this a comment for the confidentiality provision?
No. I'm just trying to understand just generally, because it seems like we're talking about a change that is effectively already in the market in certain respect.
Mike,
could somebody at the ISO just confirm that that's the process?
Yeah. Mike, this is Andrew Ulmer. I think you're asking a question about the prior topic we were discussing involving the development of a forecast.
Yeah, I am. I didn't get my question in time. Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. John, and I'm happy to try to answer it now. We may need to take it offline for you, but our expectation, which is set forth in some of our tariff sections, is that resources will submit feasible bids, and that includes their ability to produce based on sort of reasonable understanding. And we have seen observed instances where, in the 15-minute market, we receive a bid that from a variable energy resource that clears at a certain level that's above its capability to produce. And what happens in the period of time when we are developing a state-of-the-art forecast is we are receiving telemetry data from the resource. So we have that understanding of what the resource is producing in a 5-minute interval. So in relation to that, we echo back that data to the resource, essentially to say, this is your RTD, which may be a different number than the 15-minute market schedule. As a result of that could give rise, or that situation gives rise to the potential for bid cost recovery payments that we think are unwarranted. So that's essentially the root issue that we're trying to address. Functionally, that's what happens, at least based on my understanding, while we are developing this forecast that can then be used for the submission of economic bids. That helps. If it doesn't, I'm happy to put you in touch with the right people at the ISO to give you a deeper explanation.
Well, I guess my point is that this change is not really a material change. If it works as I believe it does, you're already prevented from just offering into the real-time market with a pre-ver resource. So this is, and so I think the ISO needs to explain the current restrictions and how the proposed change would modify that, because I think you've already got part of this already in effect. So I think it would just help provide context. So, thank you.
Okay, we'll take that back. Thank you. John, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. I'll just go back and see if anybody has any questions or comments regarding this proposed confidentiality language in section 33.2.8.
No questions that I can see.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you everybody for your time. If there are any other questions that you think of afterwards, don't hesitate to reach out to me. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, John. So for our last clarification for today, I'm going to scroll down a little bit further here. These two sections here both relate to MIC and the SPTO model. So I'm just going to leave it on this screen, but note that there's also a description change or a definition change in Appendix A as well around new use import commitment, and that's essentially the same thing here. So this proposed clarification is resolving a conflict in the tariff right now. The subscriber PTO model was approved in 2024. And this model allows projects to move forward outside of the CAISO's TPP process by utilizing subscribers to fund the development. And through that policy initiative, it was determined that for SPTOs that are non-contiguous, that is in a non-contiguous portion of the CAISO BAA, that they would be able to use the maximum import capability, or MIC, in the interim until deliverability upgrades are completed that would allow them to seek deliverability in the traditional way. And so as you're likely familiar, MIC, our maximum import capability, essentially serves as deliverability for imports. And there's a mechanism in the tariff in this section 40.4.6.2.2.4 that describes that annual allocation. And so what we found as we're going through or ready to kind of trigger that process, that while we had made the appropriate changes in our SPTO filing to Appendix DD, where we describe that use of MIC for the SPTO model, we had not made the same required change to the MIC allocation process itself. And so these are fairly minor changes that indicate that generating units or subscribe generation that utilize this Appendix DD section, which is the tariff language, like I said, in the SPTO. That those resources that use that SPTO model and are allocated MIC, we can actually allocate that MIC through our MIC process. So it's really a clarification that is resolving that conflict between the two tariff sections. It's an existing policy, how we had intended to deal with deliverability for these subscriber generation in the interim. And so again, just updating that MIC allocation, annual MIC allocation tariff language to incorporate that change that we've already made to Appendix DD. Are there any questions on this piece here?
I don't see any hands raised and no questions in the chat.
Okay, thank you, Hannah. We also didn't get any comments on this one either, so I will leave it at that. And thank you, thank you all for your time today. I know we had quite a bit of discussion around Andrew's item on VERS, and so like he said, we'll take that back and discuss internally. I think the target filing was early next week. I think Chris had mentioned that, and that will likely be pushed back a bit so that we can make have the appropriate internal discussion and think about this feedback that we received. So thank you for that.
Oh, sorry, it looks like we do have a question now from Brian Wynn.
Oh, sure, go ahead, Brian.
Hello, sorry, yeah, I joined a little bit late, and apologies if this has already been covered, but for the VERS self-schedule, is that also going to apply to hybrids or co-located resources that are going to use an ISO forecast for the VER component?
Andrew, did you get that question?
Hi, Brian. It's Andrew Ulmer. I did. Sorry, I was on mute. The way the tariff's been drafted is we are extending it to variable energy resources. With a hybrid resource, we do have the dynamic limit functionality that allows us to understand what the resources, their minimum, maximum operating levels are. So that should suffice.
Okay.
But again, we're going to be taking this proposed language back internally, giving it some thought, and we'll certainly give stakeholders an update on this matter before we proceed.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had.
Okay, fantastic. Well,
sorry, I was on mute. Looks like we have another question from Ryan Nelson.
Hi there, this is Ryan Nelson from Puget Sound Energy. I just had a question regarding the VERS scheduling and bidding. Is this going to apply to the Western EIM entities as well?
So the bidding rules that we have are for the real-time market are effectively incorporated into the Western Energy Imbalance Market that we administer. The EIM participating resources that are variable energy resources also utilize, I think, to a large extent, the ISO's forecast in order to create a foundation for the submission of economic bids. There's also the opportunity there to develop an independent forecast, but yeah, my sense is it would apply equally if we proceed with it.
Thanks, Andrew.
Okay, thank you for your comments and questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen because I believe, Hannah, you have a final slide here.
Perfect. Yep. So there we go. So next steps, just a quick announcement before we wrap up. These materials are available on the Tariff Clarification Filing 2025 recurring process page. So you can get to that page by going to CAISO.com, navigating to the Stakeholder Center tab at the top, selecting recurring processes, which will take you to our main initiative landing page. And then from there, you can search the Tariff Clarification Filing 2025. And the latest documents will be towards the top of the page. And then if you have any questions, please contact us at isostakeholderaffairs.com. And then for insights into the ISO grid and market operations, be on the lookout for our Energy Matters blog, and you can always subscribe as well. And with that, I'd like to thank you for joining today's session. Again, if you have any questions, please email us, isostakeholders.com, affairs@CAISO.com. Thank you all.